I had been driving for hours and the fatigue was starting to set in. The road stretched ahead, endless and dark, with no sign of a city or even a decent-sized town nearby. It was the second night of my road trip, and I hadn't planned for accommodations in advance. I figured I'd just find a hotel along the way whenever I got tired. But as the night dragged on, it became clear that wasn't going to happen. My phone service was spotty, flickering between one bar and nothing at all, making it almost useless for navigation. At around 11 p.m., I pulled into a small, deserted rest stop. The only light came from a couple of dim streetlights flickering overhead. I took out my phone and searched for the nearest motel. The best option was a place called Pinewood Inn, about 12 miles down the road. It wasn't ideal, but at that point, I just needed somewhere to sleep. I got back on the road, and after about 10 minutes I saw the turnoff for the motel. The road leading to it was narrow and lined with overgrown trees, their branches casting eerie shadows under the moonlight. As I approached, my headlights illuminated the building, an old, single-story structure with a faded neon sign that buzzed weakly. The place looked ancient, like it hadn't been updated in decades. There were only about 10 or 12 rooms, and the parking lot was nearly empty. I parked near the office and got out. The air was thick and humid, carrying the scent of damp wood and something else I couldn't quite place. Inside the office, a man sat behind the counter. He had a scruffy beard, deep-set eyes, and wore a stained t-shirt. He didn't look up at first, just sat hunched over the desk, scribbling something on a piece of paper. When he finally noticed me, he straightened up slightly. "Need a room?" His voice was raspy, almost uninterested. "Yeah, just for the night. $30, cash only." I hesitated for a second. That seemed weirdly cheap, even for a place like this. But I was too exhausted to argue. I handed him the cash, and he slid a key across the counter without another word. No paperwork, no ID check, nothing. As I turned to leave, he leaned back in his chair and muttered, "Room 7. I walked down the dimly lit corridor, the worn-out carpet squishing slightly under my boots. My room was at the far end. The door creaked loudly as I unlocked it and stepped inside. The room smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. The furniture was outdated, an old wooden dresser with chipped paint, a box TV on top, and a bed with a floral-patterned comforter that had seen better days. I locked the door and set my bag on the chair in the corner. There were thin, yellowed curtains covering the window, but they didn't quite reach the edges. I could still see slivers of the outside through the gaps. I was too tired to care. I kicked off my shoes, turned off the light, and collapsed onto the bed. The mattress was lumpy, but at that moment, it felt like heaven. I closed my eyes, trying to let sleep take over. Then, after only a few minutes, I got this weird feeling, like someone was watching me. My eyes snapped open. I turned my head towards the window, and that's when I saw it. A shadow moved away from the glass. Not like someone was just walking by, like they had been standing there, watching me. I sat up immediately, my heart pounding. I couldn't see much in the darkness, but I knew what I saw. Someone had been at my window. I quickly got up and pulled the curtains shut as best as I could, though they were still thin enough to make me uneasy. I peered out through the tiny gap. Nothing. The parking lot was empty except for my car, and a couple of others parked further down. Whoever it was had disappeared. I took a deep breath and sat back down on the bed. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, or some random passerby. I was exhausted after all. I lay back down, forcing myself to relax. But just as I was finally starting to drift off again, I got the feeling. That same horrible feeling. This time, I didn't sit up right away. I kept my eyes closed for a second, just listening. Then slowly, I turned my head to the window again. There he was. A man's face, partially obscured by the curtain, staring in at me. I shot up from the bed, heart hammering in my chest. I rushed to the window, yanked the curtain aside, and he was gone. Just like that. I backed away, breathing heavily. My hands were shaking. This wasn't paranoia. Someone was out there, and I had no idea what they wanted. I checked the door, making sure it was locked, but it didn't seem sturdy. The lock was old, just a simple turn latch. It wouldn't take much to break in. I grabbed my bag and stuffed my things back inside. I needed to get out of there. Then I heard it. The soft creak of my door handle turning. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. The door was locked. But then I heard a click. The sound of the old, cheap lock giving way. The door opened just an inch. Just enough for me to see a sliver of the hallway and the man standing there. It was the motel clerk. For a split second, we locked eyes. He looked just as surprised as I felt. Then, without a word, he turned and ran. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my keys, slung my bag over my shoulder, and bolted out the door. I ran to my car, jumped inside, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. As I pulled out of the lot, I saw him standing near the office, just watching me drive away. No reaction, just staring. I didn't stop until I was miles away. Eventually, I pulled into a rest area and sat in my car, trying to calm down. The whole thing felt surreal. I could still hear the squeak of that door opening, see his face in the darkness. The next morning, I tried calling the motel, but as soon as I started asking about the clerk, they hung up on me. So I called the police instead. I don't know what happened after that. I don't even know if they did anything. But I do know one thing. I'll never stay in a motel like that again. The motel wasn't anything special, just a 2-story roadside place about 15 minutes outside of a mid-sized city. The kind of spot truckers and travelers used for a night before moving on. I had stayed in worse, and at least this one looked clean. The flickering neon sign out front read vacancy, and the lot was half full with cars and a few semi-trucks parked off to the side. I checked in just before sunset, grabbing the key card from a tired-looking guy at the front desk. The lobby smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaner, and the vending machines hummed in the corner. Room 214, the guy said, sliding the card across the desk. Ice machines at the end of the hall. Breakfast is at 7. I nodded, took my key, and headed up the exterior staircase to the second floor. The metal steps clanked under my boots, and I passed a couple of rooms where the glow of TVs flickered through the curtains. Mine was at the far end. I swiped the card, the lock clicked, and I stepped inside. The room was standard. A queen-sized bed, a nightstand with a lamp, a wooden dresser with an old TV bolted on top. A small bathroom to the right with a sink and mirror outside of it. The air conditioning unit under the window rattled softly. It smelled faintly of stale air freshener. I tossed my bag onto the bed, grabbed my wallet, and headed back out. I had plans to grab dinner in the city and maybe have a drink before calling it a night. I was gone for a few hours, and by the time I got back, it was a little after 10. The parking lot was quieter now, the big rigs still idling softly. The front desk guy was gone, replaced by an older woman reading a paperback. I nodded to her as I passed and climbed the stairs again. When I reached my door, I patted my pockets. Then my stomach sank. No key card. I checked my jacket, my jeans, even my wallet, but it was gone. I figured I must have dropped it somewhere between the bar and here. Annoyed, I went back downstairs and explained the situation to the woman at the desk. She barely looked up as she printed another key. 214, right? Yeah. She handed it over. Try not to lose this one. I forced a chuckle and took the stairs back up. The hallway was empty, just the low hum of the vending machines down the way. I swiped the new key and pushed the door open. Something felt off. The air felt heavier, like someone had been inside recently. The AC was still running, and nothing looked out of place, but a weird unease crept up my spine. I shook it off and locked the door behind me. I was probably just tired. I got ready for bed quickly, brushing my teeth and setting my phone to charge on the nightstand. I turned off the main light, leaving only the small lamp beside the bed, and climbed under the covers. Within minutes, sleep pulled me under. Sometime later, I woke up. A sound. Software almost imperceptible. The door handle turning. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The knob jiggled again, but the door didn't open. My heart hammered against my ribs as I strained to listen. Was someone trying to get in? I sat up slowly, eyes on the door. The small hallway leading to it was dark, the bathroom door slightly ajar. Then the unmistakable sound of the door opening just a fraction. My stomach clenched. Someone had a key. Before I could react, the door closed again. A few seconds of silence stretched out before I forced myself to move. I slipped out of bed, my pulse pounding in my ears. I crept toward the door and pressed my eye against the peephole. Nothing. Whoever it was had already gone. A cold wave of dread settled over me. Someone had just tried to enter my room in the middle of the night. The front desk had given me a replacement key. Was it possible someone else had my original? I turned away from the door, exhaling slowly. I needed to think. I started back toward the bed, but stopped dead in my tracks. The bathroom. In the dim glow from the bedside lamp, I saw it. A shape. A figure standing just inside the bathroom doorway, barely visible in the darkness. Watching me. My blood ran cold. My body acted before my mind could catch up. I lunged for the door, yanked it open, and bolted into the hallway. My bare feet slapped against the cold floor as I sprinted toward the stairs, heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. I didn't stop until I was in the lobby, breathless, wide-eyed, staring at the startled woman behind the front desk. "There's someone in my room," I gasped. Her face paled. "What?" "Room 214. Someone's in there." She grabbed the phone and dialed security while I stood there, hands shaking. The minutes stretched endlessly before a uniformed man showed up, and together we went back up. My stomach churned with dread as we reached my door. The security guy swiped a master key, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The room was empty. Everything was exactly as I had left it. My bag on the bed, my phone charging on the nightstand. The bathroom door still ajar, but no one inside. Security checked everything. Under the bed, in the closet, even the small space behind the shower curtain. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No evidence that anyone had been there at all. I wanted to believe I imagined it. Maybe I had. Maybe it was some half-dream, the result of exhaustion and paranoia. But the door had opened, and someone had been in the bathroom. I wasn't taking any chances. "I want another room," I told the front desk lady. She didn't argue. 10 minutes later, I had all my things and was on the third floor in a different room. I locked every bolt, double-checked every corner, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling for hours before sleep finally took me. Nothing else happened that night, but I didn't sleep easy, and I never stayed at that motel again. I had been driving for nearly 10 hours straight. My job often required me to travel, and this time I was assigned to a project in a city halfway across the country. The company didn't cover flights, so I had no choice but to drive. They would reimburse me, but honestly, that didn't make the drive any less exhausting. Originally, I planned to stop in a decent-sized town around 10 p.m., get a hotel, and rest before continuing the next morning. But I was making such good time that I pushed forward, thinking I could find another place further along. That was a mistake. By the time I realized I should have stopped, I was on a long, desolate highway with no real city in sight. The GPS showed a couple of small towns, but they were all too far off my route. It was close to midnight when I finally saw a gas station sign and decided to take the exit. I needed fuel anyway, and if there was a motel nearby, I would call it a night. The gas station was one of those old, dimly lit places with a single attendant behind a bulletproof glass window. I filled up my tank and then walked up to the counter. "Hey, do you know if there's a hotel or motel around here?" I asked. The attendant, A middle-aged man with tired eyes looked at me for a moment before replying. "Yeah, there's an old motel about 2 miles down this road. The Oak Ridge Inn. It ain't much, but it's open." That was good enough for me. I thanked him, got back in my car, and drove down the dark, empty road. Soon I saw the flickering neon sign that read, "Oak Ridge Inn, vacancy." The place looked old, 2 stories, with doors facing the parking lot, a faded blue exterior, and a few scattered cars parked near the rooms. It was the kind of place you'd see in an old thriller movie, definitely not a 5-star experience, but I just needed a few hours of sleep. I walked into the tiny front office. A small bell jingled as I entered. Behind the counter sat an older woman, probably in her 60s, with short gray hair and a cigarette dangling from her lips. "Need a room?" she asked, barely looking up from her newspaper. "Yeah, just for the night." She grabbed a key from the wall. "Room 107, $45, cash or card?" I handed her my card, signed the receipt, and took the key. "Anything I should know?" I asked, just making conversation. She exhaled a stream of smoke and finally looked at me. "Just lock your door." That was an odd thing to say, but I didn't think much of it. I walked to my room at the far end of the first floor. The hallway light near my door was flickering, adding to the eerie atmosphere. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. The room was better than expected. Clean sheets, a small TV, and a decent-sized bathroom. I took a quick shower, changed into fresh clothes, and collapsed onto the bed. I turned on the TV to some late-night talk show and let the background noise fill the room. I must have dozed off for about 30 minutes when a loud knock at the door startled me awake. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up, my heart pounding. Who the hell would be knocking at this hour? Maybe the front desk lady forgot to tell me something. I got up and walked to the door but hesitated before opening it. "Who is it?" I called out. Silence. I checked the peephole. A man stood outside. He was tall and thin, with messy hair and a scruffy beard. He swayed slightly like he was drunk or high. He leaned forward, his breath fogging up the tiny glass of the peephole. "Hey man, can I come in for a minute?" His voice was slow and slurred. That was an immediate no. "Sorry, I don't know you," I said firmly. "Go away." I backed away from the door, waiting to hear his footsteps fade, but they didn't. Knock. 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 A harder, more aggressive knock this time. My gut twisted. I walked to the window and peeked out from behind the curtain. He was still there, standing just outside my door, staring at it. Then I saw what was in his hand. A metal pipe. I tensed. This was bad. Before I could react, he suddenly swung the pipe at my window. A loud bang echoed through the room as the glass shook but didn't break. He hit it again, harder this time. Cracks spread across the window. Panic surged through me. I grabbed my phone, keys, and wallet and ran into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. "There's a man trying to break into my motel room," I whispered urgently. "He's got a weapon. I'm in the bathroom." The operator stayed on the line, assuring me that officers were on their way. Meanwhile, the man outside kept smashing the window until I heard the distinct sound of glass shattering. Then silence. I held my breath, pressing my ear to the door. Footsteps, heavy breathing. He was inside my room. Bang. The bathroom door shook as he struck it. I clamped a hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. Bang. Another hit. Then another. I was convinced the door wouldn't hold, but just then I heard something else. Sirens. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the room from the broken window, shouting, "Police! Drop the weapon!" More footsteps. A struggle. Then finally, silence. I waited for what felt like forever before I heard a voice right outside the bathroom. "Sir, it's the police. You can come out now." I slowly unlocked the door and stepped out. My room was destroyed. Glass, furniture, and debris everywhere. The man was face down on the floor, handcuffed. One officer nodded at me. "You okay?" I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Yeah, just shaken." After giving my statement and answering a million questions, they let me gather my things. The motel owner offered me another room, but there was no way I was staying there another second. I checked out and drove off, still running on adrenaline. That was the last time I ever stayed at a roadside motel. Even now, years later, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night thinking I hear knocking at my door. The motel sign flickered weakly in the darkness, barely illuminating the cracked pavement of the parking lot. It was a long day on the road, and exhaustion had set in like a heavy weight on our shoulders. My dad pulled the car into the near-empty lot, the tires crunching over loose gravel. The place looked run down, chipped paint on the exterior walls, a sagging roof over the office entrance, and only 3 or 4 other cars parked outside the rooms. "This is the best we're gonna get tonight," Dad muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. "No service means no GPS, no phone calls, no finding something better." My mom didn't argue, though I could see the hesitation in her eyes as she scanned the dimly lit motel. My younger brother Caleb yawned in the back seat, barely paying attention. I just wanted a bed, even if it was in a place that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. Dad stepped out and walked toward the lobby. Through the glass door, I could see an old man sitting behind the counter, flipping through a newspaper like it was still the 1990s. After a short exchange, Dad came back with a key attached to a large plastic tag. Room 6. We grabbed our bags and shuffled into the room. The stale scent of cigarette smoke clung to the air despite the yellowed "no smoking" sign on the door. The room had 2 beds covered in thin, scratchy blankets, an old wooden dresser with a boxy TV on top, and a tiny bathroom that smelled of mildew. $20 a night. Can't expect much, Dad said, tossing the key on the nightstand. I sat on the bed closest to the window and tried my phone again. Nothing. No bars, no Wi-Fi. I sighed. "There's no internet," I grumbled. "Try reading a book," Mom said, already digging through her overnight bag. Caleb had already sprawled across the second bed, face down, half asleep. Dad flipped through the TV channels, all 8 of them, and settled on some static-filled news broadcast. I laid back, closing my eyes, letting the hum of the old air conditioner lull me to sleep. I don't know what woke me at first. A noise? A feeling? I lay still, staring at the ceiling, trying to place what had disturbed my sleep. The clock on the nightstand read 3:12 a.m. Then I heard it, a soft but distinct rattle at the door handle. I froze, holding my breath. Maybe it was the wind, maybe I imagined it. Then it happened again. A deliberate, slow jiggle, like someone testing the lock. I sat up, heart pounding. I glanced at my family. Caleb was snoring softly, Mom and Dad still asleep. My skin prickled. I turned my head toward the window, debating whether to peek outside, but before I could move, I heard something else. Footsteps. Slow, measured footsteps right outside the window. A shadow passed across the thin curtain, barely visible in the dim light from the motel parking lot. I sucked in a sharp breath, trying to stay as still as possible. Another jiggle at the door handle. Harder this time. More insistent. My stomach twisted. Someone was trying to get in. I reached over and nudged Dad's arm. "Dad," I whispered urgently. He groaned, turning over. "What?" "Someone's at the door." That woke him up instantly. He sat up, listening. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, bang. A heavy fist slammed against the door. Caleb shot up with a startled cry. Mom gasped, gripping the blanket. Dad was already on his feet, moving toward the door. "Who's there?" he called. No answer, just another bang, harder this time. Dad grabbed the chair from the corner and wedged it under the doorknob. "Stay back," he muttered. My pulse pounded in my ears. The motel room suddenly felt unbearably small, like a cage. The air was thick with tension. We waited. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Then finally, the footsteps retreated. We didn't move. barely daring to breathe, until we were sure the person was gone. Even then, sleep was impossible. At sunrise, Dad went to the front desk to report what had happened. The old man barely looked up from his newspaper. "Yeah, happens sometimes," he said, uninterested. "Don't leave your door unlocked." That was it. No concern. No apology. Like it was just part of staying here. We left without another word, driving until our phones got service again. None of us spoke much about that night. But I'll never forget the feeling of looking out that window and seeing someone staring back at me. And I'll never stay in a place like that again. As the hours passed, we tried to move on, but the unease clung to us like a shadow. Every gas station stop, every bathroom break on the road felt tainted by paranoia. "What if they followed us?" Caleb whispered at one point, his voice barely audible over the hum of the tires on asphalt. "They didn't," Dad said, gripping the wheel tighter than usual, but I wasn't so sure. Days later, after settling into our final destination, I decided to search for that motel online. It took a while, but I finally found something. An old forum post, buried under years of other content. It mentioned Room 6. A traveler, years ago, had experienced something eerily similar to us. The jiggling door handle, the pounding on the door, the shadow outside the window. Only in their case, the door hadn't held. My stomach churned as I read the last few lines. The traveler had woken up to someone standing inside their room. They never stayed in a motel again either. The highway stretched endlessly before me, a dark ribbon illuminated only by the dull glow of my headlights. I had been driving for hours, and fatigue was beginning to weigh heavily on me. My eyes burned, my head ached, and I could feel the sluggishness creeping into my limbs. I didn't want to stop. I never liked spending the night in unfamiliar places, especially when I was traveling alone. But my company covered all travel expenses, including accommodations. More importantly, I knew I was reaching the point where continuing to drive was dangerous. My vision blurred for a second, and I caught myself blinking longer than I should. That was enough to make up my mind. I needed to stop. I pulled off at the next exit, scanning the roadside for a place to stay. There weren't many options. The only visible lodging was a small roadside motel, the kind with a neon vacancy sign flickering against the night. It looked old, but functional. 2 levels of rooms with a small office attached to the side. No frills, but I wasn't in the mood to be picky. I turned into the parking lot, relieved to see only a handful of cars. It was quiet, which meant I wouldn't have to deal with noisy neighbors or a long wait at the front desk. The air was cool as I stepped out of my car and stretched, shaking off the stiffness that had settled in during my drive. The office door was unlocked and I pushed it open, stepping inside. The room was small and sparsely decorated. Just a desk, a few fake plants, and a buzzing fluorescent light overhead. There was a small bell on the counter, but no one was behind the desk. I sighed, rubbing my eyes. Maybe they were in the back. I waited for a moment before tapping the bell. The sound echoed through the quiet office. Nothing. I frowned, glancing toward a half-open door behind the desk that led to a back room. From what I could see, it was empty. No movement, no sound. I tapped the bell again, a little harder this time. Still nothing. A weird unease settled in my stomach. Where was the clerk? I glanced at my phone, pulling up a map to check for other hotels. The next closest one was 12 miles away. Not ideal, but if no one was here, I didn't really have a choice. Still, I hesitated. Something about the silence felt wrong. It wasn't just that no one was here. It was that the place felt abandoned, deserted, as if no one had been here for a long time. I drummed my fingers against the counter, giving it one last minute before turning to leave. As I walked back to my car, I felt a strange prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the kind you get when you're being watched. I ignored it, telling myself it was just exhaustion playing tricks on me. Sliding into the driver's seat, I started the engine and instinctively looked back at the office one last time. That's when I saw her. A woman. Her face was pressed against the glass of the office window, watching me. She was grinning, but it wasn't a normal grin. It was stretched too wide, her lips pulled back unnaturally, revealing far too many teeth. Her eyes were locked onto mine, unblinking. A sick wave of fear jolted through me, and any exhaustion I had felt moments ago vanished instantly. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs as I jammed the car into reverse, tires screeching against the pavement. I didn't wait to see if she moved. I didn't try to rationalize what I had just seen. I just drove. The next hotel was 12 miles away, but I made it there in half the time. I checked in, locked my door, and sat on the bed, trying to calm my racing heart. Hours later, when I finally felt composed enough, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I looked up the motel, and that's when I found out it had been shut down. Earlier that same day. I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound outside my hotel room made me flinch. Every shadow cast by passing cars sent a new jolt of paranoia through me. I kept replaying the image of that woman in my mind, the way she had smiled, the way she had watched me. Morning came, and with it, a shaky sense of relief. The daylight made things feel normal again, and I tried to convince myself that I had been overly tired, that maybe my mind had played tricks on me. But deep down, I knew what I had seen was real. As I packed up my things and checked out, I felt the urge to drive back to the motel, just to see it in the daylight, just to prove to myself that it was empty, abandoned, and harmless. It was a terrible idea, but I couldn't help myself. The drive back felt longer than it should have. The highway was mostly empty, and the turnoff to the motel felt unfamiliar, as if the entire place had shifted overnight. But when I pulled into the lot, I saw it exactly as it had been before. 2 levels of rooms, the flickering neon sign, the small office attached to the side. Only now it was completely boarded up. The front door was covered with plywood, the window sealed shut. The vacancy sign was dark. The parking lot was empty, no sign of life, no sign that anyone had been there in years. And yet, as I sat there staring at the darkened office window, I swore I saw something move behind the glass. A shadow, slowly, smiling. The road stretched ahead in an endless dark ribbon, broken only by the dim glow of our headlights. It was just past 11 p.m., and we'd been driving all day. My girlfriend, Lauren, sat beside me, her head resting against the window, half asleep. Our plan had been to find a decent motel and call it a night, but we'd underestimated just how empty the highway would be at this hour. When the neon sign appeared in the distance, flashing vacancy in buzzing red letters, I felt a wave of relief. "Hey," I nudged Lauren. "We found a place." She stirred, blinking groggily. "What time is it?" "Almost midnight." She stretched and peered at the motel as we pulled into the lot. It wasn't one of the big chains, just a single-story roadside stop, old-fashioned with faded paint and an office at the front. A sign above the building read, "Sunset Inn," though the S flickered erratically. "Looks charming," Lauren muttered. I laughed. "It's either this or sleeping in the car." The front office was warm and smelled of old wood and coffee. A bell chimed as we stepped inside, and almost immediately, an elderly couple appeared from a back room. The man was short and stocky, wearing suspenders over a white button-up. The woman, thin and frail-looking, had gray hair pinned in a neat bun. They both beamed at us. "Welcome, welcome," the woman greeted. "Traveling late, are we?" "Yeah," I said. "Just looking for a room for the night." "Well, you've come to the right place." The man stepped behind the desk and grabbed an old-fashioned key from the wall. "We've owned this motel for 2 years now. Fixed it up real nice. You won't find cozier hospitality anywhere." Lauren and I exchanged a glance. The place was far from fixed up, but their warmth made it hard to be cynical. As we checked in, they chatted with us, asking where we were from, where we were headed. It felt like talking to grandparents, the kind who meant well but maybe didn't realize they were prying too much. Finally, the old man slid the key across the counter. Room 5, right down the way. We thanked them, grabbed our bags, and headed to the room. The motel room was exactly what I expected, clean, but outdated. A stiff bed, floral wallpaper, a boxy old TV. I locked the door behind us, double-checking it out of habit, and we got ready for bed. After an hour of watching late-night TV, exhaustion took over. I turned off the lamp, rolling onto my side. Lauren curled up beside me, her breathing slowing. Outside, the only sounds were the occasional passing car and the soft hum of the motel's neon sign. At some point in the night, something woke me. A sound. I cracked my eyes open, my heart already beating faster, though I wasn't sure why. The room was dark, except for a sliver of neon light leaking through the curtains. Then I heard it again. Footsteps, soft where deliberate, inside the room. Every hair on my body stood up, my breath caught in my throat. I strained my eyes in the darkness, but I couldn't see anything. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe Lauren had gotten up, maybe I was dreaming. I turned my head slowly. Lauren was still in bed, facing away from me, sound asleep. I felt ice crawl up my spine. The footsteps had stopped, but the feeling remained. That gnawing primal instinct telling me I wasn't alone. I reached for my phone, gripping it tightly, and was about to turn on the flashlight when I noticed something at the foot of the bed. A silhouette, tall, still, just standing there. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Then the realization slammed into me like a truck. It was them, the old couple. They were inside our room, standing over us, staring. My breath left me in a sharp gasp. Lauren stirred beside me. The old woman tilted her head, her mouth stretching into a smile. "Just checking on you, dear," she whispered. Lauren bolted upright with a scream. My hands fumbled for the lamp, flipping it on, and the room flooded with dim yellow light. The old couple didn't even flinch. They just stood there, smiling. "What the hell are you doing in our room?" I shouted, scrambling out of bed. The old man raised his hands. "Oh, no need for alarm. We just wanted to make sure you were comfortable." Lauren grabbed her phone, shaking. "I'm calling the police." The old woman's smile faltered. "Oh, sweetheart, that's not necessary." She took a step forward. I moved in front of Lauren instinctively, my pulse hammering. "Get out," I growled. The old man hesitated, then nodded. "We apologize. We meant no harm." Without another word, they turned and walked out, shutting the door behind them. I rushed to lock it, my hands trembling. Lauren was already on the phone with 911, her voice shaking as she explained what happened. When the police arrived, the couple admitted to entering our room with a master key. They insisted it was just to check in on us, that they did it with all their guests. The officers asked if we wanted to press charges. I hesitated. Looking at the couple, two elderly people who, up until that moment, had seemed harmless, I felt a twinge of pity. Maybe they were just lonely. Maybe they weren't all there mentally. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we had woken up just in time. We chose not to press charges, but we packed our bags and left immediately. Months later, I looked up the motel out of curiosity. It had been shut down. No official reason was listed, but part of me didn't want to know. Because to this day, I still wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't woken up? And more importantly, how many other guests hadn't? Ryan tightened his grip on the steering wheel as rain lashed against the windshield, the wipers struggling to keep up. Emily sat beside him, scrolling through her phone, looking for a place to stay the night. They had planned a weekend getaway, but unexpected delays left them searching for last-minute lodging on a lonely stretch of highway. "There's a place called Redwood Motel about 5 miles up," Emily said. "Not a lot of reviews, but it's cheap." Ryan sighed. "We don't have much choice. Let's check it out." Minutes later, they pulled into the dimly lit parking lot of the Redwood Motel. The neon sign flickered, casting an eerie red glow over the cracked pavement. A single light illuminated the front office, where an older man sat behind a yellowed counter, watching a small, static-filled TV. Ryan rang the bell. The man looked up slowly, his milky eyes assessing them. "Need a room?" His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't spoken in days. "Yes, just for the night," Ryan replied. The man slid an old-fashioned key across the counter. "Room 6, no visitors, no noise after midnight," he muttered, before returning to his television. Emily exchanged a glance with Ryan but took the key. As they walked back to the car, she whispered, "Something about this place feels off." Ryan chuckled. "It's just an old motel, Em. We'll be fine." The room smelled of mildew and faintly of cigarettes, despite the no smoking sign on the door. The furniture was outdated, the TV a bulky relic from the 90s. The only sign of modernity was a deadbolt on the door. Emily frowned. "I don't like this place." Ryan kissed her cheek. "One night, we'll leave early." She nodded reluctantly and went to freshen up. Ryan sat on the bed, scrolling through his phone, when a soft knock came at the door. He froze. Another knock. "Emily?" The bathroom door opened, and she peeked out. "Yeah?" Ryan's blood ran cold. Someone else was knocking. He crept to the peephole. The hallway was empty. His stomach tightened. "No one's there." Emily walked over, her brow furrowed. "Maybe the wind?" Ryan deadbolted the door. "Let's just sleep." At 2:47 a.m., Emily woke up, heart pounding. Something wasn't right. Ryan lay beside her, deep in sleep. She listened carefully. A faint scratching noise came from the window. Her breath hitched. Slowly, she turned her head. A shadowy figure stood outside, pressed against the glass. She gasped, shaking Ryan awake. "Ryan, someone's outside." He bolted upright. The scratching stopped. Ryan grabbed his phone, turning on the flashlight, but by the time he reached the window, there was nothing there. "Stay here," he whispered. He grabbed the motel room key and stepped outside into the humid night air. The parking lot was empty except for their car and a few others. He circled around the building, scanning the darkness. A rustling noise. He turned quickly. Nothing. His breath was heavy as he re-entered the room. "I didn't see anyone." Emily's face was pale. "I swear, Ryan, someone was there." "I believe you," he said, locking the door again. "Let's just stay put until morning." At 4 a.m., the doorknob jiggled. Emily sat up with a gasp, clutching Ryan's arm. The knob turned violently. The door rattled. Ryan grabbed the lamp from the nightstand. "Who's there?" Silence. A slow, deliberate knock. Then another, and another. Ryan's heart pounded. He dialed 911, but there was no signal. Emily grabbed his arm. "Ryan, we have to get out of here." The knocking stopped. Footsteps shuffled away. Emily grabbed the keys. "Screw it, we're leaving." Ryan nodded. They grabbed their bags and crept toward the door. He opened it cautiously. The hallway was eerily quiet. They sprinted to the car, fumbling with the keys. Ryan started the engine and floored it out of the lot, gravel spraying behind them. As they sped down the empty highway, Ryan looked over at Emily. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond. His stomach twisted. He reached over and shook her shoulder. "Emily?" She slumped forward. A deep, wet gash ran across her throat. Blood soaked her shirt, pooling in her lap. Ryan let out a strangled cry, nearly swerving off the road. His hands trembled as he pulled over, breath coming in gasps. He hadn't heard anything, hadn't seen anything. He turned back toward the motel in the distance. The neon sign flickered, casting a ghostly red glow on the empty parking lot. A figure stood under the light, watching him. Later that morning, as the sun rose, Ryan pulled into a gas station, hands shaking. The attendant, an older woman, noticed his pale face and blood-stained shirt. "You okay, son?" Ryan, barely able to speak, stammered. We stayed at the Redwood Motel. Someone killed Emily." The woman's face darkened. Redwood? Ryan nodded. Yeah, why? She sighed. That place has been closed for years. A couple was murdered there in room 6. The killer, they say he still roams the place looking for his next victim. Ryan's breath hitched. He turned back toward his car, his stomach twisting with dread. On the fogged-up rear window, written in smeared blood, were the words, "You were supposed to stay." Some places carry the weight of their past, and some dangers don't always come from the living. Always trust your instincts. When a place feels wrong, it probably is. And sometimes, once you check in, you never really leave. The neon vacancy sign flickered against the darkened sky, buzzing faintly as moths circled the light. Claire pulled her coat tighter around her swollen belly, feeling the crisp autumn wind cutting through her. The motel was the kind of place that smelled of mildew and regret, the kind she would never have considered staying in before. But desperate times left little room for comfort. She rubbed her belly absent-mindedly, whispering reassurances to the child inside her. Just for one night, baby. Tomorrow we'll be somewhere better. The lobby was dimly lit, a single desk lamp illuminating the bored-looking receptionist behind the counter. He barely looked up as he slid the key across the counter. Room 14, end of the hall. Checkout's at 11. No loud music, and don't call the front desk unless it's an emergency. His tone was dry, indifferent. Claire nodded, took the key, and trudged toward her room. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked the door, exhaustion weighing heavily on her limbs. Inside, the air was stale, the bedspread patterned with outdated florals. The television sat dusty on its stand, and the bathroom light flickered when she switched it on. It wasn't home, but it would do for the night. She sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed, pressing a hand to her belly. "One more night," she whispered. "Just one more." The sound of a car screeching to a halt outside made her jump. Through the thin curtains, she could see the parking lot bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. A man stumbled out of a sedan, clutching something close to his chest. Another man followed, a gun raised. A robbery, right in front of her room. Her pulse quickened. The first man, maybe the victim, was pleading, hands raised. The second man shouted something, but Claire couldn't make out the words. Then, a gunshot rang out, tearing through the quiet night. Claire slapped a hand over her mouth, stifling a scream. The victim collapsed, unmoving. The shooter glanced around, his eyes scanning the motel. For a terrifying moment, she thought he had seen her. She scrambled backward, heart hammering. She needed to call the police, but her phone was in her purse, across the room. Footsteps crunched outside. Someone was approaching. She barely had time to react before the doorknob jiggled. Then, a knock. Slow, deliberate. "Ma'am, I know you saw something. Let's talk." Claire froze. She knew better than to answer. Seconds passed. The footsteps retreated, but she didn't dare move until long after the motel parking lot fell silent. Morning came, but the terror of the night before lingered. The police were at the scene, taping off the parking lot. She kept her head down as she loaded her bag into the car. She couldn't be here any longer. She barely made it a mile down the road before she saw the familiar black sedan in her rearview mirror. Panic surged. Had the shooter seen her after all? Had she been followed? Her hands tightened on the wheel. She needed to get somewhere safe. A gas station, a diner, anywhere with people. But before she could turn, the car behind her accelerated. She barely registered the impact before her world flipped upside down. Claire woke to darkness. A damp, musty smell filled her nose. Her head throbbed, her belly ached. She was on the ground. No, a cold, hard floor. A voice. Familiar. Too familiar. "You should have just stayed put, Claire." Her breath caught in her throat. Number it couldn't be. A figure stepped closer, and the dim light revealed the face she knew so well. Her husband. Tears pricked at her eyes. David? You weren't supposed to run, Claire. You were just supposed to stay put until I took care of things, but you had to see, didn't you? The robbery. The murder. It wasn't random. It was him. He had planned everything. She struggled to sit up, but ropes bound her wrists. David, please. He knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face with unsettling gentleness. It was never supposed to come to this, but you kept pushing. You wanted to leave. You wanted to take my baby with you. I couldn't let that happen. Tears spilled down her cheeks. David, don't do this. His expression hardened. You were always so stubborn, but I can't risk you talking. She thrashed against the restraints. David, please, our baby. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Hesitation. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. He pulled the knife from his pocket, its blade catching the dim light. Claire sobbed. You don't have to do this. David exhaled sharply, gripping the knife tighter. I do. She screamed as he lunged, pain exploding in her abdomen. The agony was blinding, searing. She gasped, her vision blurring. The warmth of her own blood pooled beneath her. David whispered in her ear, his voice eerily calm. I loved you, Claire, but love isn't always enough. Her body grew cold. Her last thought was not of herself, but of her baby, of the life that would never be, and then there was nothing. The motel wasn't much, just a two-story building on the outskirts of town. It had a faded blue sign that flickered slightly when the wind picked up, and the parking lot was half full with old sedans and a few work trucks. It wasn't the kind of place you'd pick for a vacation, but it was cheap, and for a few days it would do. I had checked in the previous afternoon, tired from the long drive. My room was on the second floor, at the far end of the building, with a view of the gas station across the road. The place smelled a little musty, but the sheets were clean, and the lock on the door worked. That was enough for me. After settling in, I went out to meet some friends in town. We had dinner, a few drinks, and caught up on life. It was a good night. By the time I got back to the motel, it was late, almost midnight. The place was quiet, the lobby empty except for the night manager, a middle-aged guy with tired eyes who barely looked up from his phone as I walked past. I took the stairs to my room, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The air was thick and still, the kind of silence that felt unnatural, like the building was holding its breath. I shook off the feeling, unlocked my door, and stepped inside. Everything was as I left it. I locked the door, double-checked it, then got ready for bed. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to grab some breakfast in the motel's small dining area near the lobby. It was nothing fancy, just some coffee, toast, and a few pieces of fruit. There were only a handful of people there, most of them older couples or business travelers passing through. That's when I noticed him, a man sitting alone at a corner table facing me. He was average height, thin, with short brown hair. He wore a black t-shirt and dark jeans. At first I thought he was just zoning out, looking in my direction without really seeing me. But then our eyes met. He didn't look away. There was no expression on his face, no embarrassment, no polite smile, just a blank, steady gaze. It wasn't just unsettling. It was wrong. I turned my focus back to my food, trying to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Maybe he was just a weird guy, socially awkward. That happened, right? But every time I glanced up, his eyes were still on me. I finished eating as quickly as I could and left. As I walked out of the dining area, I forced myself not to look back. The day went by without much thought of the man. I met up with my friends again, spent hours exploring the city, and by the time I got back to the motel, I was exhausted. The lot was quieter than before, a few cars missing. The lobby was empty except for the same night manager, looking half asleep behind the counter. As I walked past the dining area, I noticed someone sitting in the dark. It was him, He was in the same seat as before, barely visible in the dim lighting. He wasn't eating, just sitting, looking around. My stomach tightened. I didn't slow down, didn't give him the satisfaction of knowing I'd seen him. I walked straight to the stairs, climbed up to the second floor, and made my way down the hallway to my room. Once inside, I locked the door immediately, then checked the window. It faced the empty parking lot, nothing unusual there. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was staying here too. Maybe he was just a guy with nowhere to be. But something felt off, a gut feeling I couldn't ignore. I took a shower, hoping the hot water would help me relax. By the time I got out, I felt a little better. That was until I realized I had nothing to drink. The tap water in the bathroom smelled metallic, and I wasn't about to drink that. I remembered seeing a vending machine at the far end of the hallway near the stairwell. It wasn't ideal, but I didn't want to go to bed thirsty. Just as I was about to open the door, I hesitated. An uneasy feeling settled over me, and without thinking, I leaned down and peered through the peephole. He was there, standing in the hallway just outside my door. I felt my heart stop. He wasn't knocking, wasn't moving, just standing. My breath caught in my throat and I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. My hands felt clammy as I reached for my phone, my mind racing for what to do. I had no proof he was doing anything wrong. He could just be standing there, maybe even in front of his own room. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. My mind was a mess of fear and logic, but when I finally looked through the peephole again, he was gone. I debated staying inside all night, but the thirst won. I needed water. I cracked open the door, looking both ways down the hall. It was empty. I walked quickly to the vending machine, grabbed a bottle, and turned to head back. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew it was him. I picked up my pace. My heart was slamming against my ribs as I reached my door, fumbling with the key card. My hands were shaking. I swiped once, red light. Again, red. Oh God. I tried one more time. Green. I yanked the door open, slipped inside, and slammed it shut. My breath came in ragged gasps. Then, the doorknob turned. I froze, my entire body locked in place. A soft knock. I backed away, staring at the door like it might burst open at any second. My hand found my phone, and I called the front desk. My voice shook as I explained what was happening. The man on the other end told me they'd send someone up. Minutes passed. Then I heard voices in the hall. When I checked the peephole, the night manager and another employee were there, but the man was gone. They asked me for a description, then said they'd keep an eye out. I barely slept that night, jumping at every little sound. The next morning, the manager told me the man wasn't a guest. He had been wandering the motel for days, slipping past staff. When they found him and confronted him, he ran, but he didn't leave. They eventually found him hiding in the laundry room. The police were called and he was arrested for trespassing. I don't know why he was following me. I don't want to know. All I know is that from now on, I'm triple locking every hotel door I stay in. I hope this captures the eerie realism you wanted. Let me know if you'd like any tweaks or a different angle.